Hi, I'm Susan Rutledge, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to make all 8 of these fully editable graphic styles that you can use to jazz up your text in Adobe Illustrator. We're going to be using the Appearance panel, so I'll go ahead and open that up, come to Window, down to Appearance. I'll grab the tab and dock it here next to the Properties panel, and we'll also be using the Graphic Styles panel, so I'll get it, and let's see if we can dock it next to the Appearance panel. There we go. Now I'll recenter my artboard and we're ready to go. I'll move to a document where I have the RGB colors and the numbers up here at the top if you want to repeat what I'm doing. And I'm using Cat's Eye Bold font for this project, which is a free downloadable font from Adobe if you're a Creative Cloud subscriber. So the first thing we'll do is grab one of my text samples. I'll hold the Shift key down, so as I drag to enlarge it, it drags in proportion. Now with the Appearance panel, it shows what the attributes are of whatever object or text is selected on the artboard. If it's an object, all of those layers show up from the very beginning, but if it's text, I've got to go through one extra step because what I'm seeing here is type and characters, and that's not telling me that I have a black fill, which is obvious from just looking at the text. So I'll come over to the left toolbar. I need to make sure the fill color icon is on top of the stroke color icon, which means this is active. So when I come down and click on none, Illustrator is going to remove the fill color here. Now I still have the text, we just can't see it until we add it back in the Appearance panel. And I'm going to come down here to the bottom of the panel, click on this little square that's filled in. That's the Add New Fill icon, and Illustrator gives me a fill again. I'm going to change the color to this light green, and when I added the fill, it automatically added in a layer for the stroke, but until I give it a color, it's not going to show up. Well, I'm going to change the stroke color here to pink, and I'll change the weight to 25 points and press the return key. And that's not very pretty yet, but I'm going to press down with my mouse on the stroke layer and drag it down underneath the fill layer. Now what happens is Illustrator places the stroke layer behind the fill layer on the artboard, and that looks really nice. If you'd like to know more about how layers work in Illustrator, I'm going to leave a link to a tutorial at the end of this video, and I suggest you go check that out next. Well, we're not quite finished with this graphic style. I'm going to add a special effect to the fill layer. So I'll select this layer, and I'm going to come down and click on FX, which is going to allow me to add an effect. Now the top part of the pop-up menu has Illustrator effects. The bottom half has Photoshop effects. They will all work in Illustrator, but if you use the top half, you're going to maintain the vector status. So I'm going to use this stylize. I'll come over and down to Inner Glow and click here. The mode is multiply now. I'm going to change this to normal, and for the color, I'm going to change this to black. Here's my cursor. Right now, this is the active color, but I can come over and just press down with my cursor, and that changes the color to this black. And if that's the color I want, I'll just say OK, and now we have black. I'll change the opacity to 50%. And the blur to 0.08. I'll leave edge selected and say OK. And that adds a nice inner glow to our first graphic style. I'll select the text, move to the Graphic Styles panel, and to add this to the graphic styles, all I have to do is come to the bottom bar and click on the plus sign, and the style is now added, so I can delete it from the artboard. I'll get another sample, and we'll work on this one now. I'll remove the fill, Go to the Appearance panel, add a new fill. This one is going to be light green. And again, Illustrator added a stroke layer when I added the fill, but I'm not going to add a color here, so we'll just be able to disregard that. I'm going to add another fill layer. So I'll come back down and click here again. I can have as many fills and as many strokes as I want on any object that I'm working on. That's the beauty of using the Appearance panel. And now I have two identical layers on the artboard. You just can't see them because they're stacked right on top of each other. Now the way the layers work, the layers that are higher in the Appearance panel are going to be in front on the artboard. So this layer, which is on the bottom in the Appearance panel, is at the back on the artboard, and that's the one I want to work with. So I'm going to change the color here to dark green, and then I'll add a special effect to this layer. So I'll come down and click on the Add New Effect, and then I'll come up to Distort and Transform and choose Transform. And whatever changes I make in this box are going to be made on the layer that is selected. So I'm going to leave Scale alone. Under Move, I'll type in 0.04 on the horizontal slider. When I type in a positive number, any object selected is going to move to the right. If I type in a negative number, the object in that layer is going to move to the left. With the vertical slider, we'll type in 0.04 here as well. When I type in a positive number, the object in the layer moves down, and when I type in a negative number on the vertical slider, the object which is selected in the layer moves up. I'm going to leave everything else the same and say OK, and we're left with a very sharp and subtle drop shadow for our graphic styles number 2. I'll select the style, go to the graphics panel, and we'll add that to our styles and delete this sample. I'll grab another text sample, enlarge it, remove the fill color, and go back to the Appearance panel and add a fill. We'll change this to the light green, and again we have the stroke layer which we're going to ignore and add another fill color here. I'll change this color to the dark green again and add a special effect to that layer. We'll go back to Distort and Transform and Transform. This time I'm only going to type in the horizontal slider, and I'm going to use a negative number, so my layer is going to move to the left. So we'll type in minus 0.03. I'll leave everything else the same until I come down to Copies, and I'll type in 10. Now what will happen is Illustrator is going to make 10 copies of that layer, and each one is going to move 0.03 inches to the left. So I'll say OK, and we're left with a deeper drop shadow. So you can see how just changing the values in that Transform panel can change the direction and the size of your drop shadow. I'll select the text, move to Graphic Styles, add that here and delete it from the artboard, and grab hold of some more text, increase its size, and remove the fill color once again. Let's go to the Appearance panel to add a fill back in. I'll change this to green, and we are going to use strokes this time. I'll change this stroke to black and increase that to 2 points, and we'll add another stroke. This stroke is going to be orange, and I want this one to be 8 points. We'll add another stroke. This one red. We'll double the size to 16 points and add one more. This one is going to be blue, and we'll double this to 32 points and press the return key. Now we'll move the layers around so they look a lot better than they do now. I'll grab the largest stroke first, drag it down underneath the green fill. Next, we'll take the second to the largest, the 16 point, place it on top of the 32, then 8 on top of 16, and finally 2 on top of 8. And it's looking pretty good, but we're going to add a little special effect to the green fill. My slider around that layer, pick a green, or I can add the special effect, the RGB color here, and inner glow. This time I'll change the mode back to multiply, and I'll change the color. Then I can click on this black and I can move my cursor around to pick a green, or I can type in the RGB color here. That's what I'm going to do. Here are the RGB numbers. The first one is 0, then 104, and 56, and I can just ignore all the rest of these numbers and say OK. So here's my green. I'm going to change the opacity to 100% and the blur to 0.05. We'll leave edge selected and say OK. And here is our next graphic style. I'll select this, open the graphic styles panel, and we'll add that so we can delete this on the artboard and grab another sample. I'll remove the fill and add a fill back in. Change the color to light green, and then we already have the stroke added, so we'll change the color to black and change the size to 7 points. Then I'll add a special effect to the stroke layer. So with it selected, I'll come down, add the special effect, distort and transform, choosing transform again. I'll leave scale alone. I'm going to change the vertical slider to 0.03, and this time we're going to type in 40 copies and say OK. And then grab the stroke layer, drag it underneath the fill layer, and that gives me what we call a long drop shadow, and you can extend that as long as you want by just adding to the number of copies in that transform panel. Now I do have my letters a little closer together than the cat's eye bold font actually starts out with, and let me just click here and show you how you do that. This icon here is the one that adjusts the tracking, and I've changed this to a -50 to move my letters closer together. All right, we'll come over here to graphic styles, add this graphic style, and delete the one on the artboard, and we're moving right along. Let's increase this, remove the color here, and I'm clicking and nothing's happening. And that's because the stroke icon is on top. I have to click on the fill icon to make it active. This always pops up. I'll close that out. And now I can remove that fill color. So if you are trying to get rid of it and nothing happens, make sure that the icon that you want is on top. Let's move back to the appearance panel, come down and add a fill color. I'll change this to light green, and then we're going to use the stroke layer here, change this to white, and 4 points. I'm going to add a special effect to the green layer. We'll come down and get this and stylize, inner glow. I'm going to leave multiply in the green and 100%. I am going to change the blur to 0.1 and leave edge selected and say OK. And then we'll come back and add a special effect to the stroke layer. I'll do stylize and drop shadow. I'll leave the mode set on multiply, the opacity at 100%. I have the X and Y offset values at 0 so that my white stroke will stand out all the way around the text. I'll change the blur to 0.03, leave darkness at 100%, and say OK. And that drop shadow does indeed make that white stroke stand out on the entire text. It looks like it's raised up off of the artboard. I'll select this. We'll add this to the graphic styles panel and delete that sample. Get another one and increase the size. I've got to make the fill color active to remove the fill, and move to the appearance panel and add a fill color. This time we're going to make this pink and change the stroke color to green. And I'll change the size of the stroke to 6 points. And then we're going to add a special effect here. I'll come down, grab this. This time I'm going to use path and offset path. Now I could come up and add the offset path up here, but when I do it in the appearance panel, everything is all together. I'm going to change the offset to 0.25, and we'll say OK, and it's all overlapping and looks terrible, but we can fix that. I'll come back down and add one more special effect again to the green stroke layer, this time Pathfinder, and I'll click Add. And when I do that, Illustrator cleans it all up and it looks great. So again, first time I did the offset path, next time I did Add. Let's select this, add it to the graphic styles panel, delete the text, and we are ready for the last graphic style. I'll make this active, remove the fill color, add a fill color, change this to light green, and then for the stroke, I'm going to make this black and 9 points, and then I'll add one more stroke. This one's going to be white, and it'll be 5 points. Now that's not a bad look, but that's not the look that I showed you at the beginning of the video. So let me make a couple of changes. On the white stroke layer, I'm going to click on the word stroke. First of all, change the cap to a round cap, and then come down and click on dashed line. Make sure this second box is highlighted, and then type in 1 point for the dash and 9 points for the gap. And that's all we're going to do for this sample, and I think this one is my favorite. I love the polka dot stroke. And the thing that's so cool about it is this and all of the other graphic styles are completely editable. So if I realize I've misspelled a word or just simply want to change it, all I have to do is select the text. I'm going to delete this S and replace it with a Z, and you see how easy that was. And then if I want to change the color, I'll select the text, come over and let's change the fill to an orange, and we'll change it back to a green. So it's super easy to either change the words themselves or to change the color of any of the attributes you've added into that graphic style. I'm going to move over to the graphic style panel and add this last sample here, and then we can delete this as well. Now, to show you how easy it is to use graphic styles, let's get the type tool again, and I'm going to type out some text. And all you do is click on the graphic style to apply it to whatever you have selected on the artboard, and that is how easy it is. Now the caveat to this is that these graphic styles are only in this document, so if I opened up another document, I wouldn't have access to them. I'd like to be able to keep these and use them again, so I'm going to save them, and let me show you how. In the Graphic Styles panel, we click on the top right icon, and I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom and click on Save Graphic Style Library. Illustrator by default takes you to the Graphic Styles folder, and you can save them here or somewhere else as long as you don't forget where you put them. I like saving my files in a separate folder in case I happen to have a software crash, then I don't lose the things I've created. But for now, we're going to go ahead and just place these in the Graphic Styles folder. So I'll type in Susan's Graphics for Text and click Save. Now, when I open a new document, we'll come up to File, New, and just create one here. The graphic styles I just created aren't here, but if I come up to this little icon and click on Open Graphic Style Library, we have Susan's text styles right here. They come up in their own tab and they're ready to use. And that's how you save and access your graphic styles. Well, I do hope that you have enjoyed this video and learned a lot about using the Appearance panel and the Transform panel. And if you enjoyed this video and learned something, I'd appreciate a like, and I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my future tutorials, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.